Today's show sponsor is Sienna Dawn Media Integrated Marketing Agency. Sienna Dawn Media is more than just a marketing agency. They're your partners in progress. Their mission is simple: to alleviate marketing bandwidth, allowing creative business owners to focus on what they set out to do: create. Sienna Dawn Media empowers creatives to thrive without the burden of managing their own social media and marketing campaigns. So if you're ready to set sail toward new horizons, let Sienna Dawn Media chart the course and steer your business toward success. Visit siennadawnmedia.com.
Blah, 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 blah.
Welcome to the Our Forever Smiles podcast, a podcast created to support mothers of children who were born with clefts and those who love them. I'm your host, Laura Arroyo, and I'm also a mother of a daughter who was born with a surprise cleft palate. I know the challenges you face every day. Whether you have just learned the difficult news of your baby's cleft lip or palate, you're in the midst of pre-op or post-op, or you're an OG cleft mom, this podcast is for you. In a weekly conversation, we will talk about everything from feeding and speech therapy to surgery and school. We'll share tips from guest experts and advocates, and even share a little joy in the process. You can listen to Our Forever Smiles wherever you listen to podcasts. Don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned. Hello, and welcome back to the Our Forever Smiles Cleft Mom Diaries and Support podcast. Before we jump into this episode, I would like to invite you to join this community to hear conversations with other cleft moms and advocates that will help you feel supported along your journey. All I want you to do is click on the follow or subscribe button. I love your support, and this is the best way to support this community is if you follow or you subscribe to our podcast and our channel. So thank you so much for doing that. We love your support and we are so excited for this year. As a note, we are not medical doctors and we do not intend for you to use the information that we share here today as medical advice. We are parents and advocates who love our children and we are sharing our own personal experiences. Before I introduce our next guest, I do want to say that I'm so excited that we have merch available. You asked and we delivered. Our Forever Smiles merch is now available. Not only will you be rocking some awesome gear, but you'll also be supporting the show and helping us spread awareness about the cleft journey. Every item purchased fuels more inspiring conversations and uplifting stories. Today on the podcast, I am so thrilled. I actually went on her Facebook page to see just like about her a little bit. And the first picture I see is her lobbying for the ELSA bill. And so I am just like so excited to talk to our guest today. I actually spoke with someone earlier who also was lobbying for the ELSA bill, and we'll dive into that when we speak. But Tiffiny is a cleft affected individual and she's a mother of 3, and one of her children was also born with a cleft. She is passionate about advocacy and raising awareness in her state while also working on her master's in social work. So welcome, Tiffiny.
Thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited.
Yeah. What was that experience like? So is that a picture of you and your daughter on your profile picture?
Yeah, so that was me and my daughter in DC when they did the Advocacy Day on the Hill back in July. But yeah, that's a picture of both of us right before we got to go share both of our stories, which was, it was really cool sharing that experience with my daughter and just getting to lobby for something that's so important to me and will matter for her and for other people.
Yeah. That's awesome. You know what's so interesting is so Tiffiny and I had talked a little bit about just being on the podcast, and she mentioned that she had some podcast jitters, which I actually get too. Sometimes I get nervous, like just talking to people and stuff. But then I like think about myself and I'm just like, people are like, they get jitters and I'm like, it's just me. But I feel like, so Corinne, I don't know if Corinne, but she's Laura, are you going to go to the hill with us in in July again?" And I'm like, "Yeah," I'm like, "all for it." And then I'm like thinking to myself, like, "Oh, wait, I have to talk to those like big important people." Like, now that is terrifying.
I do know Corinne. I love her so much. Like, she really
Yeah.
is a phenomenal person. And actually, the first time I met her was at the Advocacy Day in the Hill. And it's so funny because talking to and lobbying for and sharing my story with those people was significantly easier than thinking about, oh no, I'm on a podcast and people are going to hear me speak and do they care? Which it feels different. Like, than being like, maybe someone will care versus being there and being like, no, I'm asking you to care. If that
Mm.
makes sense.
Yeah, like, I can see that. I can see what you mean by that. I didn't think about it that way, but yeah, it's almost yeah, because you see it as, like, demand I guess your position in talking with what is it, like, senators and stuff
Mhm.
like that. It's more, yeah, no, I'm asking you to see me versus this maybe feeling like it's optional, like, listen to my story.
Yeah.
But no, people yeah, I will say people do care and people want I think you in particular have a really special story because not only do you have the lived experience, but you have the other perspective as well, being a cleft mom. And so I don't know if maybe you felt like this, but I would imagine, right, if I were in your shoes, I would imagine that I would probably have spent a lot of time in my life feeling like an outsider a little bit or just feeling maybe not a part of the norm, I would say, or just feeling having that sense or that feeling. But then it's now when you become a mom of a cleft affected child, do your worries like about yourself go away and you turn into, oh wait, like now this is her journey and I'm gonna do everything I can to I hate to use the word fix, but, like, to change the things
Yeah.
that went wrong in my journey.
Yeah, that's such an interesting thought because I really was an outsider. I was bullied really bad about how I looked and about my class and things like that during middle school, which is not easy for anybody, let alone when you're being bullied for it. And I remember when I got pregnant with my daughter, she's my second child.
Mhm.
Um, and we went in for the ultrasound, and my first child wasn't cleft affected. And so offhandedly at the end of the ultrasound, I was like, "Oh, can you actually check?" Because I wasn't as concerned because I didn't my first child didn't have a cleft. Um, and the nurse or sorry, the tech looked at it and went, "I have to go get a doctor," which is never good when the tech says, "I have to go get a doctor," right? Like that that something great isn't coming. And the doctor comes in, reviews the ultrasound, and tells me that my daughter will have cleft lip, possible palate involvement, which she does. And I burst into tears. And it was interesting because the doctor had assumed that I was crying because of not knowing what it was or like the typical kind of parent thing. The doctor was like, it's okay, it'll be fixed. Like they have ways to fix that now. And when I got home, I remember what it was like to be bullied. How do I keep that from happening to my daughter? I remember having surgeries, and so I've had over 20 surgeries. And being like, is that going to be my daughter? How much school is she going to miss? Is she going to miss making friends? And all of those things culminated into just what can I do to make her experience better than mine was? I got really involved at her hospital. So I work with some parents there where we create educational events and community events for children going to her hospital. I am the parent patient representative for the collecting craniofacial team at her hospital. And I just made this thing of how can I make it so that she doesn't have some of these same experiences which hopefully is working. I think she's happy. Yeah, she has friends, and that was exciting to see because I didn't have as many. And everybody's always, we all love her. And that makes at least some of what I went through worth it
Mm.
and influences how I react now.
Ah, that's so interesting. And forgive me, I don't know if it's like late or what, but like I'm starting to get like emotional because I'm just thinking about that. Like I think about my own journey, and my journey was so gut-wrenching hard. And but then to think, does it really it genuinely doesn't even touch on what some people experience. I didn't have to go through NAM. I didn't have to like there's so many different things that we didn't experience. And but just to think about because you know the experience. It's
Yeah.
and you know it well, you know it intimately, and I had already felt bad for the whatever the possibilities were for when my daughter was born, but to know it is I can't imagine
Mhm.
being in your shoes. I can't imagine what you were feeling during that time because I just think about myself. I think it was hard for me and just to think about that extra, like, layer. But yeah, like, I find that to be really special. Do you feel like I know you got other kids and maybe they might listen to this, but if you know where I'm going, do you feel like you're, like,
Yeah.
bonded in a
I
way?
I do, and I love all my kids and have different bonds with each of them, but there is a different bond there with my daughter. It doesn't make it better or worse, it's different. It's like when oh gosh, now I'm gonna get emotional. When she sits next to me and goes, "Mom, I'm so tired of being different." And I can sit next to her and I can go, "I know. Sometimes I'm tired of being different too." And there's that connection there. Like my mom did the best she could. She worked really hard, and there is a difference between being a mom and being a patient. And there is, but there were times where I'd tell my mom, I don't want to be different. And usually my mom would just do the best and would be like, oh, I have this thing I don't like, and that makes me different. And that's true. It really is true, but it's not always the same, if that makes sense, you
Yeah.
know? But it's also given me a higher regard for my mom, if that makes sense in some ways.
Mhm.
Because when you go in for surgery, you're terrified because you're going in for this thing and you're going to wake up and it's going to hurt. But you
Mm.
go to bed and you wake up. And yes, you wake up in pain, but there's that chunk of time that just doesn't, you don't remember it. And being a parent in that situation and going, oh, this is the chunk of time where I was asleep, where
Mm.
I didn't know what was happening. And me worrying for my daughter and me wondering how it's going to go and will she be okay and spending those hours and that time. And that's its own hard. That's its own different. They're both so valid, but it is nice to know that my daughter does have someone to talk to, which is also one of the reasons why I advocate so fully for community, especially for kids, because you might not get that or get it a little bit or even get it a lot. You might have your own thing, but when they can sit with someone else
Mm.
and go, they get it too. It was nice when we went to DC and my daughter had just had a bunch of teeth removed and had a procedure. She was like, Mom, are the kids going to make fun of me?
Mm.
And I could tell her, no, these kids know exactly what it's like to go through what you're going through. And there's its own comfort in that.
Yeah, so that was also, like, a question that I thought of as well. Is she when so she goes to the hill, right, and here I am as an adult, and I'm terrified, and she's 8, right? And she's going with you. Does she of course, she doesn't fully understand what she's doing, but does she have some understanding of what's going on, or does she get to share her story in those moments, or how does that work?
Oh, she loves it. Like, she is my little advocate, really, like, truly. And I asked her whether or not she wanted to share something. And originally she was like, no, I don't want to. And I'm like, okay, are you okay if I write your story? Because they had us like write a little blurb to hand out with the information. And she was like, yeah, I'm okay with that. And the night before, she was like, you know what, Mom? I do want to share. And so I brought note cards with me and we wrote out what she wanted to say so that she could share it. And she was a rock star.
Mm.
Like she just did it and did amazing. And I think it was really, my story was great to share, but when they heard her share her story, it was not just, oh, these adults are telling me these things. It was like, these kids are also telling me things.
Mm.
And she'll tell people all the time, I went to DC and we are advocating for ELSA. And she asks me all the time, she goes, Mom, how is the bill doing? Where is it at? How is it doing? And one day after another, though,
Yeah.
I'm like, I
Oh,
don't have any new information for you.
I wish
Uh,
they had the updates, but they are gonna have they did have a live that they were doing on Facebook, right? And then that didn't work
yeah.
out. So, but I just got an email literally right before I joined the
Oh,
call.
oh, cool.
Yeah, they're gonna do it. They're actually gonna do a webinar instead, and they're gonna do it on January 7th. I don't. This will probably not air before then, but yeah, they're gonna do an update on it. So hopefully we'll have some good news about Elsa in like a future episode that I can update. But just think, going back, do you have any siblings yourself? Are you the only child or the only cleft affected child that your mom had?
So I'm the youngest of 5, and I am the only cleft affected child. So my mom was actually on birth control when she had me. And
Wow.
so I was all around, just, I was a surprise. I was a lot of surprises all at once. And yeah, which was another reason why after my first didn't have a cleft, I wasn't as concerned because I had always been told that I was like this random thing that happened. Not a thing, I'm not a thing, but my cleft was a random chance that it
Mhm.
wasn't likely to happen again. And my youngest, is not cleft affected either. My daughter. Yeah. So
Did
it
you
was,
have any did they have genetic testing and confirm that it was isolated and random, or did they have, or was that just something that the doctors just said with no testing? Do you know that?
that was just what the doctors had told me. I haven't actually had genetic testing of it. That was what they told me. And even when I asked, like, my OB and other people about it, other professionals, they're like, oh no, it's like such a small chance. They're like, it's a little higher because you have one, but, and honestly, I'm not actually sure even how accurate that was, considering how much still isn't really known about clefts and cleft care.
Yeah, it's so I've spoken to so many people and I just find it, to me it's like odd that there's so little information, and I think of course there are people that feel like there's some that they want to figure it out. Like they go down the rabbit hole and they want to figure it out. Was it like the pre-workout? And I've heard like Tylenol and all this like things that can happen. I personally didn't. I tried not to. First, we had genetic testing anyway because they thought that Giselle had PRS. And they wanted to test for other things as well. So they did do genetic testing and they didn't find anything. So they did say that it was isolated or random. So I think that probably eased my mind a little bit. But I think, I don't know, I feel like we can go down this rabbit hole and really like I was talking to someone and I'm like, if we're talking about people that study this all day, like scientists are like, they haven't figured it out. I don't think like moms and like a Facebook group, you know, are gonna are gonna crack the case. And I don't mean it to be dismissive, but it's just I don't know whether we're gonna be able to figure it out. And so that kind of relieved my, I guess, my guilt, or something that like I stopped trying to figure out why it happened and just dealt
Mhm.
with what it was.
Yeah. I mean, I know for genetic testing, if my daughter wants to do it, because I'm done having kids. 3 is a good even number for me is what I tell people. But,
Right.
yeah, if she wants to do it, I'm totally all for doing it because then that would affect her. If it is a generational thing that'll happen or
Mhm.
if it just a random thing that might or might not happen. But I can say that with it being if it is generational, she'll have or he, if it's a boy, will have 2 generations who have fought for better care for them, you
Yeah.
know? And so there are things you can do and there are just ways to help. And if that's what happens, then that's what happens and we just roll with it.
Yeah. Yeah. So you talk a little bit about your reaction to finding out about your daughter's cleft, but have you talked to your mom about what her reaction was and learning about your cleft?
So I've talked to my parents a little bit about it. My mom was an information gatherer. So she went to the nearest hospitals because I was from California. So she went to UCLA and went to their medical libraries and looked up the information that she could find. But I know certain things weren't as accessible, like bottles and those sorts of things. And she, like, at one point had to go around to multiple hospitals just trying to find pigeon bottle. Dad and my parents had, I'm going to put it as not as much knowledge. Um, just to be fair, but they did do the only take pictures of her good side, or I didn't have pictures of me before my first repair. Like I have some, which is one of the ones I sent to you, but there weren't very many that if I was that young that you could actually see the cleft present. There were negative reactions from family members and things like that that my parents didn't really share as much with them. I had one family member that was like, I refuse to hold a defective baby. Um, and it's one of the areas where being a parent of a cleft affected child has also provided me some grace. Them, if that makes sense, want your child to have the best outcome. And there are definitely better ways to do it than others. And they didn't always do it in the best or most tactful way, but they did what they could
Mhm.
sometimes, some of it. So there's been some conversation. My grandma was a huge supporter of my mom. She had several stillbirths and had a child pass away from childhood cancer. And when my mom called from the hospital, my grandma's question was, "Is the baby alive?" And my mom was like, "Yes." And my grandma said, "Okay, we can do anything." And when I found out about my daughter and went to my grandma and talked to my grandma, and she was like, "That baby will be just as loved as you were." So it's like we had, from the stories I know, there was lack of support, but also just overwhelming support. And I could tell those people that I could go to as I was growing up, the ones who I knew would provide that overwhelming support. And it's made it easier knowing the type of support that I should give my daughter.
Mm. Yeah, for sure. Now, I guess when you had your daughter, did your mom go through this phase of like, "Well, we didn't have that when you were" like, I had to travel for miles for bottles, and, like, they didn't do that, and that's new, and I can't imagine what she must have felt like as well, like, just in seeing how things have
So
changed.
we did have that a little bit. I was like, the Dr. Brown bottles had come out pretty, I think, a year or two before. And I was like, "Oh, that's going on my registry." And my mom was like, "You can get these bottles on a register?" You know, my mom told me a story when I was an infant and she had actually ran out of bottles and she was calling around to these hospitals trying to find one. And this one hospital was like, "They ordered these bottles by mistake, but I can't give them to you."
Mm.
They're like, "Come around to this store at this time and maybe something will be there." So
Wow.
my mom drove to this hospital. There were these bottles, like some back alley deal to get each bottle. Yeah, so there was some of that where she was like, "Oh my gosh, you can just get these bottles and anybody can feed the baby. There's not
Mhm.
like all of this training that has to go into it." They didn't do taping for the NAM when I was a baby. The fact that taping would slowly bring the lip closer together to help with the repair was really cool. It was cool to me, and my mom was like, "That's amazing." So there were these things, and even I've seen it with some of my surgery. So I've had 2 bone grafts. My first bone graft, I was 5 and it failed, and the
Mm.
scar is like 4 inches, 5 inches long, on one of my hips. And then I had my second bone graft when I was 16, and the scar is like maybe an inch. And so there's just so many things that they have pacifiers people can use. They have bottles. They have all of these things to help with reflux. They support groups. That was a really big thing.
Mhm.
I met my first cleft-affected person when I was 19 and in college.
Wow.
And my mom didn't even know support groups were a thing, and truly they might not have been a thing. And so there really has been a lot of really cool things since I was a kid that definitely helped me be a better mom and help take care of my daughter.
Yeah. So she's 8. So has she had bone graft yet, or is she prepping for it?
So she's had bone graft, and that was a really hard one for me to prep for because it was a really terrible surgery for me. They used for my daughter, this is one of the other cool things, they used bone putty, which I was like, "Oh my gosh, they don't even have to make
Yeah.
like graft. That's super cool."
That's what I was gonna
Um,
say is that now I've heard them, mention that they're gonna start using cadaver bones, and so that they actually have this article. It's funny, I, interviewed one of the doctors at, is it Colorado Children's? And yeah, they wrote an article and it's called "It's Hip to Go Home." Basically, they're not removing any bones from the hip anymore so that the healing process is allows patients to go home sooner. So yeah, I thought that was funny, but they're using like cadaver bones in place of
mhm.
like having to do that graft in the hip and stuff like that. But it's fascinating, like all that has changed with that. The other thing I was gonna mention as well is I can imagine that is really hard was hard for you as a mom, but also being a patient because you have those 2 major surgeries, right? You have lip and then you have palate. And then you have this long, like, lull period where there isn't, like, too much going on, and then bone graft comes, and then a lot of cleft-affected individuals have shared with me that is actually the first surgery that they actually remember. And just waking up and then not being able to walk, like, having to use crutches, it's just a very odd thing. So, yeah,
Yeah,
I guess
and
your experience with that, if you could share that.
yeah, so the first surgery I do remember is my first bone graft at 5.
Mm.
And as a 5-year-old, that was really hard because they told me you can't walk, you can't do anything, you can't move. And I was a really stubborn kid. They're like, "You can't walk." And so then I like crawled out of the room and I'm like, "I'm not walking." And that uh probably drove my mom nuts, truthfully. But that was hard. Not being able to eat things that I loved was really hard. And then having that surgery later at 16, and so I had that bone graft again, and then I had a few other so I had 3 more surgeries in high school, and that was hard too because my face was changing around boys I liked,
Mhm.
friends I had, and just missing school, and there's just there's these moments where you just go to sleep and you wake up in pain. I'm sure if you've ever had like aches and pains, but you know what that for or you've had a kid, you didn't happen to take the medication on time, you didn't do that, and you wake up and you're like, "Oh my gosh, this really hurt," except it's your face. And that's really terrible. I had to go with my mom while she went to get a new phone at the time, and some person came up to me, gave me their card, and thought that I was being abused at home because my face was bruised and all of these things. And it's a hard recovery. But at 18, 17, I was like, I don't want to have any more surgeries. If I don't need to have it, I don't want to have it because I was tired of losing time. I was tired of going to sleep and waking up in pain. And surgeries are just hard.
Yeah. You're sharing also about the difficulty of preparing for your daughter's bone graft. Can you talk a little bit about that one as well?
Yeah. It was really interesting because for my daughter, I was really worried about the recovery, but I was also really worried about the going into it. Something that was really hard for me as a kid was knowing that I was going to wake up and go to the hospital and be put to sleep and then wake up in pain was a really hard thing for me. And when I was in high school, before my first surgery, my bone graft, obviously not my first surgery, but before that break, my brother decided that he would ease my fears. And he took me to Del Taco when they did that get a 10 tacos for $5. We went at 11:30 and then we got our bags of tacos and we went home and we had a taco eating contest to see who could eat the most tacos before the cutoff time of midnight. And out of all the things I remember prepping for, that was one of the things I remember the most. And so with my daughter, I was like, I'm really anxious, but she's really anxious too. And so the day before her surgeries is actually typically a really fun day. This last time she wanted to, because it was during the summer, she wanted to take a bike ride. So 9 o'clock at night, it was still light outside. So we went around and took a bike ride.
I love
She
that.
wanted being more conscious. So my daughter can't have food or anything. And so I don't have anything until
Mm.
she goes back. Or things like I knew what her diet was going to be. And it really sucked to be the person sitting at the table and seeing what everybody else can eat and what you're stuck with eating. It's a really lonely feeling. And so we looked up meals that we could do together that everybody could eat. It's not going to kill my family to eat soup for a few nights in a row of different types. And so there were just little things like that with prepping with my daughter that was just, how can I be more conscious about what she's going through and how can I take that mental load off of her and just make it a little bit better? Because for the most part, you can get surgery lists, right? The things that you should pack, like always pack your own pillow because it's much better. A stuffy, pack a new book or fun things to do like that. And make sure you have your medication in order. And the medical side tends to be a pretty well-oiled machine. You can get pretty good information from your doctors, from other sites and things like that. But this emotional side of it is less so. With my daughter, I was like, okay, how can I make sure that I'm catering to that? And so instead of being super anxious, she was okay. And now she tells people, yeah, I had surgery, but we got to eat donuts. And so she's already planned like the food she wants to have for the eating contest for her next surgery whenever that happens. And so instead of looking at this thing, which is, and it is a sucky thing, it sucks. It's turned into this, how can I make it better? And make it a memory instead of a memory of something terrible.
Yeah. I think pairing it with something to look forward to, like you have something that that you're potentially dreading, but you also have this thing that you're looking forward to, like the donut eating contest. Like that's like phenomenal. I think so. Just the way that you like talk about your experience and all those things, I can imagine that you weren't like always confident in yourself. Do you think that I guess the first question is like, how have you been able to find your voice and like your confidence? And then do you think that becoming her mom feels that as well? Like it empowers you and pushes you even more to be more confident in yourself and what you're sharing with the world?
Oh my gosh, that is such a loaded question. I have a lot of problems with confidence. I mentioned I had been bullied. I didn't always have some of the best relationships with people. And so my confidence really, it's hard when you expect to see one person in the mirror and it's changing, or you're always told growing up that it should change. At some point, you will be thick. At some point, you will be right. Like that, this, this end point that you're supposed to get to. And until you get to that point, you're just not good enough. And that was so hard for me and still is. And I was not a very confident person. I went to college and college was an odd experience because I went out of state. And for the first time, nobody knew what surgeries I'd had. Nobody knew anything about me. And that was refreshing in a way, you
Mm,
know, and it gave me a little bit of that confidence, but it still wasn't like, people would ask me about growing up, and I was like, "Oh, I'd had some surgeries, it's fine." But it was really something that, like, I brushed off. It wasn't a part of myself I wanted to accept or bring forward at all, really. And when I had my daughter, I went, "This isn't something I can leave behind. This isn't something that I can sweep under the rug." Uh, and it took me quite a few years to finally be like, No, this is, I'm going to fight for what I can for her to make it better." And then, really, when I went to DC, was a big moment for me that I'm like, oh, I'm also fighting for myself
mhm.
now. Which is funny because that's like less than a year ago to say, oh, I'm finally gaining a bit more confidence in myself. But there's truth there. I made this decision to go to DC and I made this decision to apply to my master's program. And I made this decision that there were these things that I was going to do that I'm like, no, this is me and this is the person I am and this is who I want to be. And to going to DC and starting my master's program and being like, I am proud of who I am and I'm proud of myself and what I can accomplish, and hoping that I can show that to my daughter and be like, yes, you're different, but be proud in those differences. And even like with my other kids, be proud of those things that, because they're all you. It's not, being cleft-affected is one part of me. I also love all these other things, but it's still a part of me and still a part that needs to be acknowledged. And so my relationship with my daughter and having my daughter has given me permission in a way to look at those pieces of myself and go, this is what I can do. And this is where I can make a difference. And this is what I can afford.
Yeah. Wow, I love that. I think that's incredibly powerful. It's almost like a symbiotic, well, it's just naturally like that anyway. You feed off of each other in a way, like in your advocacy. And I think the more she empowers you and you empower her as well. I think even in that, like, just the simple fact of her like changing her mind when the day before you go up to DC, I feel like you probably got her wheels turning. You know what? I should share my story and I'm with my mom. Like I can do it. And that I think that courage comes from us as parents, right? Like, we have to instill those feelings into our children, and we have to encourage them to step out there and put themselves out there and to be vulnerable even when it's hard. And I did wanna ask you though, which I forgot to ask you, what was your initial reaction in seeing your daughter when she was first born?
I was just happy that she was there. Oh gosh, now I'm gonna cry because when you grow up and you're getting bullied and you're getting treated different and you're getting treated like you're horrible, and like I had people call me a monster, like I had just all of these really horrible things. And to be pregnant and go, am I going to have those same feelings? People felt that way towards me. Am I going to feel that too? And just when I had her and they handed her to me, and I'm like, perfect. And that was healing in its own way, knowing that instantly I just went, I love her and she's perfect.
Yeah. And what about after her repair? Did you mourn that smile, or what was that feeling of, okay, you're one down? I haven't asked you about how many surgeries that you've had, but I think you mentioned 20. Did you say 20?
Yeah, I've had over 20.
Yeah. So you're like one down. But what
Yeah.
was that like? Did you have a bittersweet moment with that?
Um, I think it was just, I think I was more overwhelmed with the fact that she was in pain
Mm,
than I registered the difference
yeah.
or the change. And I try, because my youngest has global delay.
Mhm.
So I've tried really hard to go, there are just some milestones that happen, and I can be sad about the milestone that's gone, but I also need to be happy for where it's going and what's moving forward, if that makes sense. And there was that sadness of, I loved her from the moment I saw her. Now there's this difference, but it didn't change that love. It was just different. It was different experience. And I was just happy to see where we would go from there. And I focused a lot on, this is going to help her eat better. This is
Mhm.
going to help speak better. This is going to help her do these things. And we still honor that. I haven't been so good in the past couple years, but we did the Smileversary thing, which is
Mhm.
a tradition I absolutely love, to be honest. And my daughter was like, "Why don't we do that anymore?" And I'm like, "Mommy's kind of got snatched. Mommy's coming," you know? But we still, I think I don't mourn it as much because we still honor what was.
Mm.
We'll share those pictures from before of her, before the surgery, and I share the pictures after. And so I think there's less of that sadness because I honor both sides.
Yeah. What is something that you wish people knew about children, or children that were born with the cleft lip and palate in general, or just cleft affected individuals?
I'm sure people have said this before, but that we're just like everyone else. We're just like the other kid. We're just like the other adult. We want to be loved. And I think that's what everybody wants. We want to have love and we want to have connection. And when we're given that and given those opportunities, when anybody's given those opportunities, we can shine and be our best selves. And we don't have to be limited to this one aspect of our life.
Mm. Yeah. What do you think has been the hardest part of your journey, whether yours or you as a parent, as a mom?
myself as a cleft-affected adult, it's been learning to love who I am and how I look and be okay with that and accept myself as I am. For being a mom, it learning to live right now. Well, because I worry a lot. Like, how many surgeries is she gonna have? Like, how's she gonna deal with this? Is she gonna be bullied? Is she gonna be and there's only so much you can plan for. And being able to be now and recognize we're doing things together now has been more important and made the hard part of stressing over everything easier.
Yeah, I can totally understand that. I know people always say take it one day at a time, and I think that's really helpful for parents and moms to do. I think that's helpful advice because it's a long journey, right? Like you think about it and it's if you're thinking about all the years that you have, it's very easy to get overwhelmed and to get caught up in like how am I going to do this? Like this is
Yeah.
impossible. But yeah, I think taking it a day at a time and step by step is really the best approach and the best advice that I've heard as well. Just in closing, what do you think has been and it could be the same, right, as something that you've shared already, but what do you think has been the biggest lesson that you've learned along your journey?
I will hopefully finish. I know I said a little bit at the beginning, but that there are definitely moments as a cleft affected individual where it's hard. The surgeries and the expectations and the just what you're supposed to be or how you're supposed to look and all of that. But there's also hard as a parent. There's hard in handing your child to a doctor and hoping for the best. There's hard going to appointment after appointment. And so I think the biggest thing is that there's hard for both cleft affected individuals and parents. And that kind of both can give themselves some grace and give yourself a little bit of sometimes when you're recovering from surgery, you're just doing the best that you can.
Mhm.
And when you're a parent, you might not do all the right things, but you're doing the best you can. And in the end, that's the best you can do. And that
Mhm.
there's hard on both sides and provide yourself some grace.
Yeah, yeah, I thank you so much, Tiffany, for just, like, being vulnerable with us today and sharing your story. I think that you have such a, like, wonderful and beautiful perspective because both sides of this, right? And it's very obvious and apparent that you absolutely adore your daughter and you're each other's biggest cheerleaders. And yeah, and I think that she has a wonderful example and a wonderful parent to look up to in her experience. And I don't like to use the word lucky because I hate when people tell me I'm lucky. Am I really lucky? But it's an honor for her to have you as that example for her, right? Um, because yeah, like you know what it's like. You didn't have like your right-hand person, the person that you look to for everything, to have the same shared and lived experience. Wow, what a special thing. So thank you. Thank you for sharing y'all's story here today.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
And thank you all for listening to the Our Forever Smiles Clef Mom Diaries and Support podcast. Be sure to subscribe and submit a review of the podcast wherever you listen. I hope that you've enjoyed this audio experience. Maybe you cried a little, laughed a little, but more importantly, I hope that you feel a little piece of reassurance and even joy in your journey. Talk to you next week.